Okay, so let's get into this. We're diving into a source that is, on the surface at least, just utterly ridiculous.
It really is.
It's a short philosophical dialogue, Treffen sich zwei Schlafwandler, which, translates to two sleepwalkers meet.
And beneath this, I guess, this comic setup is a critique of modern life that is, frankly, terrifyingly accurate.
So the scene is simple, right? It's just two people. They're discussing their weekend plans.
Yeah, and one of them, a guy named Hankman, says his big plan is to go sleepwalking.
But not as a disorder.
No, not at all. He treats it like a hobby, almost like golf or gardening. He says he does it for regeneration.
Regeneration, because he feels much more rested afterward.
It's a complete inversion of pathology.
Right.
Sleepwalking isn't something to be fixed. It's a scheduled activity.
Exactly. And our mission today is really to use this one single absurd dialogue as a kind of philosophical shortcut.
Right, a vehicle to get at some really core concepts. Everything from classical skepticism about reality all the way up to, well, contemporary ideas about simulation and consciousness.
What's so amazing is how fast it destabilizes everything you think you know about agency, about being awake versus being asleep.
Well, you hit the core paradox almost immediately.
Hmm.
Hankman insists he needs his normal nighttime sleep
Okay.
in order to process the experiences that he had during his sleepwalking.
Wait. So the conscious self is just,
Yep.
what, the secretary? The one who does the administrative cleanup for the much more interesting, adventurous, unconscious self?
That's it exactly. The unconscious activity is the main event. It's the source of experience, of rest. The conscious mind is just there to file the paperwork later.
It flips the whole hierarchy on its head.
Completely.
So that's where we have to start, with that structural inversion. I mean, medically, philosophically, sleepwalking is a bug, it's a failure state, a disruption.
An anomaly.
But here, in this source, it's called a necessary activity, a healing form of retreat.
That phrase, Heilstein-Rückzugsform, is so important. A healing form of retreat. He actually misses it when he can't do it.
So this immediately lifts it out of the literal. We're not really talking about wandering around town in your pajamas.
No. It becomes this rich allegory for, I think, the desire to escape what you could call the overconscious permanent state of modern life.
That constant need to be on.
Yes. That state where you have to be accessible, productive, and constantly reflecting on every single action, every minute of the day.
So if you see this intentional non-consciousness as a response to that pressure, it's a pretty subversive act.
It's a radical act.
Yeah.
He's rejecting the mandate for constant presence. When he says, at night I sleep, I don't have time for it, then he's talking about sleepwalking. He's carving out a necessary counterworld.
A second life.
A second unconscious life, just to recover from the exhaustion of the first, consciously managed one.
It's the ultimate rebellion against hustle culture. Sorry, can't sleep. I'm too busy processing the things I did while I was asleep.
Right.
But hold on a minute. If he's scheduling it, isn't that just turning his escape into another item on his to-do list?
That's the brilliant subtlety here. The conscious mind might, schedule the block of time, but the activity itself, the non-conscious wandering, is outside of its control.
I see.
It's the moment the mind literally lets go of the steering wheel. This restorative non-consciousness lets him move through the world without that burden of constant self-critique.
Yeah.
He's seen, but he isn't consuming. He's just passing through.
Which brings us right to the next layer of this, where the text just leans into the absurdity. It asks about day sleepwalking.
For people who work at night.
And Hankman's answer is just, sure, that's exactly how I do it.
And that's the moment the joke becomes this really searing critique of modern alienation.
Because it's no longer about night or day.
Exactly. The timing becomes irrelevant. It stops being about a physiological state and starts describing a general modern condition, the state of inner absence during outer activity.
That phrase is going to stick with you. Inner absence during outer activity. It describes the default setting for so many of us. You're functioning. You're moving, talking, working, but mentally, you're just running on autopilot.
It's that feeling of moving through your routines without being truly present. And this has some really deep roots in social and political thought. You can immediately connect it to Guy Debord's critique in The Society of the Spectacle.
Right, from the 60s. Debord's whole argument was that modern life itself has been transformed into a spectacle, something we watch rather than live.
Precisely. The modern person becomes passive, a consumer of images, of experiences, and ultimately a passive consumer of their own alienated life.
A spectator at your own show.
Exactly. If you're a day sleepwalker, you are the perfect demonstration of this. You're watching yourself perform your life, but you aren't really living it.
And that passive functioning, that kind of goes directly to what Hannah Arendt was so concerned about.
Absolutely. You see powerful echoes of Arndt's work here, especially her concept of Gedankenlosigkeit.
Thoughtlessness.
Right, but it's often misunderstood. She wasn't talking about being stupid. She meant the failure to have that reflective inner dialogue that's supposed to inform our actions.
So it's not a lack of intelligence, it's a lack of reference.
Yeah.
You're acting without connecting that action to any inner principle.
That's it. Arndt was worried that modern life, with its focus on just functional labor, on routine, would lead people to simply function, to just execute tasks without ever referring them back to themselves, their values, their world.
And Hankman's day sleepwalking is the ultimate ironic picture of that fear.
It is. He lives, he works, he interacts, but whether he's consciously there for any of it seems, beside the point, his inner world is absent.
It's the dark realization that maybe we're all just achieving goals without ever having been present for the achievement.
And once you go down that road, once you establish this universal autopilot, the conversation naturally has to confront the biggest question of all.
The status of reality itself.
Which is where we hit the moment of total destabilization. The other character just asks him, could it be that you might be sleepwalking right now?
And you can just feel a floor drop out.
Yeah, that one simple question throws you back, 350 years? Right to the foundation of modern Western philosophy, to René Descartes' dream argument.
The old how do I know I'm not dreaming problem.
Exactly. Descartes asked if there were any reliable markers, any clear signs to distinguish waking life from a really vivid dream. And he concluded, that you couldn't be certain of the external world from sensory data alone.
But Hankman's situation is even more complicated.
It is. Descartes had a simple binary, waking versus dreaming. Hankman's dealing with a planned, intentional unconsciousness that he finds restorative, which might be happening during what feels like a waking conversation.
It just blurs the line completely.
It does. You stop asking, am I awake or asleep?
Yeah.
And you start asking, which layer of non-consciousness am I in right now?
And then Hankman pushes it even further, referencing the whole dream within a dream idea.
And that's the jump. That moves us past classical skepticism and lands us squarely in the territory of modern simulation theory.
Right into Jean Baudrillard.
It's a direct line. Baudrillard argued that in our world, reality has been replaced by simulacra, by copies that no longer even refer back to an original.
So it's not that reality is hidden or distorted, it's just gone, replaced by a perfect copy.
Yes. So when Hankman suggests they might be in a sleepwalking conversation right now, and that state might contain other layers of non-consciousness, he's basically describing a hyper-reality.
If you can't tell the difference between being conscious and being in this intentional, restorative, unconscious state, then where's the real waking up that's supposed to ground everything?
The text doesn't give you that certainty. And that uncertainty about reality is immediately followed by uncertainty about the self, especially when it comes to memory.
Which is when we get one of the dialogue's most, brilliantly dismissive lines. At the absolute peak of this crisis, he just says, but it doesn't really matter, because once we wake up, we won't remember any of this conversation anyway.
That line is just a slap in the face to so much of Western philosophy. It highlights the fragility of communication and, more deeply, the fragility of personal identity.
Because if the whole experience leaves no memory, what good was it?
Well, we'll go straight to John Locke. Locke's whole theory of personal identity was that your self, your I, is fundamentally tied to the continuity of your memory.
So if you can't remember an experience, it didn't really happen to you.
To the self that you identify as you, yes. But this dialogue suggests that maybe forgetting isn't a loss. Maybe it's a relief.
A feature, not a bug.
Exactly. If the sleepwalking conversation was just more functional noise in an overconscious world, forgetting it lets you reset, get back to the schedule, without adding more administrative burden to the conscious mind.
So the goal isn't to accumulate memories, it's to efficiently purge the unnecessary ones.
And yet, through all this talk of unconsciousness and forgetting, Hankman still has this clear sense of agency. He insists on leaving because he has a goal.
I've got to go. When I wake up, I want to be at home.
Right.
How do you square that circle? How can a state defined by a lack of conscious control still be planned, goal-directed, and end up where it's supposed to?
That is the final paradox, isn't it? The planned loss of control. It really pushes us into modern debates about free will. You could connect it to, say, Heidegger's concept of Alltäglichkeit.
Everydayness, the idea that we're often just absorbed by routine.
Yes, we get absorbed into the itself, just functioning without deep self-reflection. Hangman's agency isn't coming from some deep inner self. It's coming from the gravitational pull of his routine. The routine demands that the body ends up at home.
And modern cognitive science would kind of back that up, right? The idea that our conscious intention is just playing catch-up to what our non-conscious brain has already decided to do.
That brings us right to Daniel Wegner's work, The Illusion of Conscious Will. Wegner suggests much of our behavior is guided by non-conscious processes, and that feeling of, I chose to do that, often arrives after the action has already started.
So when Hankman says, I want to be at home, he's just reflecting a worldview where that kind of partial distributed agency is just how things work.
The body knows where it needs to go, whether the conscious mind is paying attention or not.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this wild journey. We have this short, absurd dialogue about voluntary sleepwalking. And it uses this comic idea to fundamentally critique the modern pressure to be constantly awake. It reframes non-awareness as a kind of healing retreat from a world of routine and, well, simulated consciousness.
It holds up a mirror and forces you to ask if what we call being awake isn't just a very high-functioning form of day sleepwalking.
And it all ends with that very simple, very grounding line. When I wake up, I want to be at home. What's the ultimate takeaway there?
I think it's the collective yearning for grounding, the desire to arrive somehow in a world or a self that makes sense. Maybe the sleepwalking isn't an avoidance of reality, but a more direct, non-conscious route to finding that sense of belonging.
And that ambiguity brings us right back to Arndt's warning about thoughtlessness. If the problem is just being absorbed into routine without reflection, what if the answer isn't simply to wake up?
Which might just mean returning to the hyper-scheduled performance of life.
Right. What if the answer is learning how to, I don't know, sleepwalk more attentively? How do you even define conscious living in a world built on routine?
It definitely forces you to question whether our relentless pursuit of being busy is actually the same thing as being awake.
Indeed. We hope you feel thoroughly rested and ready to process these insights. We'll see you next time for the deep dive.